So what is it about this animal that earns it such monikers as hairy frog, horror frog, and wolverine frog? It's quite an eccentric list of names, and not for no good reason. Real quick, let me ask you, what makes a mammal a mammal? When I ask some folks the question, I get all kinds of different answers. Some say that a mammal is any animal with hair. Now, I'm sure that you and I can both agree that this is a silly definition, and not just because some mammals don't have any hair at all, but also because a lot of insects and arachnids also have hairs, and that doesn't make them any particular mammal. But no, it's silly because, by that definition, the hairy frog would be as much of a mammal as any dog or cat. That's right, hairy frog isn't a misnomer. They do in fact have hair. Well, I say they have hair. To be specific, they're called dermal papillae, or dermal filaments. These filaments are found dotting the dorsal and thighs of a breeding male during mating season. They're not true hairs, but rather extensions of the skin that look like hairs. Hairs made of skin. Usually, after all, mammalian hairs are made of keratin, human nails basically, while the merely hair-like stuff on hairy frogs are much more delicate. But one thing about the composition that may give hint as to what these skin hairs are actually used for is that little fact you're already likely familiar with. Amphibians breathe through their skin. That's why they really hate humans, the humans touching them. Their skin takes in all the little oils and oxygen and water and things around them. Since their hair is just an extension of their skin, you can guess that they breathe through their hair too. Well, kind of. Have you ever put a towel under water? Or anything with individual hairs, actually? Because if you did, then you would notice a bunch of bubbles sticking to it. This is because of surface tension. Water molecules at the surface of the water interact with water molecules already in the hair, and through cohesive forces, create a thin layer of water that connects the bubble to the hair. This phenomenon is more noticeable when the surface tension is strong and can make bubbles appear to cling to surfaces, including those with fine structures like hair. So keep surface tension in mind, because it's something hairy frogs will definitely need later down the line. Put a pin in it. Hairy frogs are commonly found in the rivers and ponds of Central Africa, specifically areas like the Democratic Republic of Congo, Nigeria, and the Mayombe Hills. They exhibit typical frog breeding behaviors, but there's a more specific adaptation they've taken on for the purposes of their egg survival. You see, it's very common for female frogs of any locale to lay their eggs underwater and have the male swim up to the eggs and fertilize them while the female isn't looking. This is something more common in amphibians who spend a lot of their life underwater. But with hairy frogs, their eggs are in no shallow waters. They're typically found only in the absolute depths of the deepest ponds of Central Africa. Compound this with the high pH levels of the water they're in, and you've created a nightmare for respiration. Thankfully, it seems hairy frogs possess the ability to bring oxygen from the surface down with them. Notice how only the males, the ones spending the longest time in the depths, grow the hair-like structures. Notice also that they only grow this during breeding season, when they are forced to spend the longest time frame underwater. It's clear to me that this is an adaptation taking advantage of the wonders of surface tension, rather than a trait used in, like some researchers have theorized, peacocking. Some say that hairs are only displayed in males to attract females, but this isn't a valid conclusion, as not only are hairy frogs not picky on mates, but also a female isn't likely to be selective when choosing a male partner to copulate with, as the eggs are often blasted out unfertilized, waiting for some male to swim up and fertilize them. But that leaves one of their monikers, wolverine frog, unsolved. Wolverines are hairy, yes, but why would you name them after such a ferocious beast if they only had that in common? Well, the resemblance doesn't just end there. Frogs are known for their soft, sticky feet and general harmlessness. You wouldn't imagine yourself getting shredded by such a quaint little animal now, would you? Well, think again. Hairy frogs seemed so irritated by their lack of offense that they were willing to break their own bones to fix it. That's right, resting in a chunk of connective tissue and collagen rests a small piece of bone on each toe with a tip needle-like in sharpness. If the hairy frog is ever attacked or perceives a threat nearby, it cracks its sharp bones forward, like how you would crack your knuckles, and pushes its bony tip into place. And it is breaking its own bones, too. actively. This mechanism seems exceedingly painful as a defense mechanism, so it's likely only done as a last resort. These claws, after all, cut through its own toe pads. What's fascinating about this mechanism, however, is the regrowth that seems to happen swiftly after the claws are retracted. It seems that their skin, their muscles, and most spectacularly their bones, heal themselves over the course of at most a week. How long does it take the human body to repair a finger? At least 3 weeks? Not to mention, the lack of a muscle dedicated to the retraction of these bones suggests this healing is a passive process that needs not very much physical dedication. But despite the many peculiarities of hairy frogs, they have an infuriatingly small amount of studies on their physiology. A majority of studies on them are done on wet specimens, which are dead carcasses saturated with formaldehyde to prevent decay. So, we don't exactly know a lot about them. There is already so much to the species that's strange on a surface level. Imagine how much more there is to discover. We don't even have footage of their eggs, their mating process, or them breaking their own bones. We just know that it takes place. But why do we possess so little in terms of study on this animal? The IUCN Red List classifies them as least concern, which should be wonderful for researchers. Though, unfortunately, they are threatened by logging and agriculture. There is also an extensive threat of hunting of this species by the locals. The Bakassi people, a people residing on Mount Manitoba, Cameroon, have a particular use case for the hairy frog. Of course, in terms of threat for this species, it isn't comparable to the destruction brought on by logging and agriculture since it's nowhere near the scale, but it is intriguing nonetheless to see how their culture has adapted to integrate the species. For the Bakassi, the hairy frog is known as ibad, and is often used as a source of income for the Bakassi youth, where they are exchanged with international pet trade. The frogs also serve as a great protein source year-round, but especially during the dry seasons when ponds recede and they're easier to collect. Hairy frogs are also hunted en masse during weddings, where they're served in large quantities as food. However, visitors and/or non-natives are forbidden from hunting this species, likely as a way to prevent this custom from getting out of hand. Hopefully this wish is respected in the future as well to prevent a systematic problem for the hairy frog wild populations. Hairy frogs caught for the pet trade are more often than not caught alive and in pairs. Females are only caught if they possess fertility, and if they're too old, they are set loose. Allegedly, they get orders from all sorts of dealers. I wonder if John Underground Reptiles gets his from Bakassi land. After all, they are field collected. That's just speculation, of course, but also nothing particularly wrong with that. It has become a staple for the Bakassi people economically. In addition to being a staple in their diet, the hairy frog is also propped up culturally. For the Bakassi people, during heavy rains, the males of this species fall from the sky, which is where they find individuals along footpaths in the forest. They serve as an indicator of good luck, and the mystical ability for the male frog to bring fertility to previously sterile couples. If a Bakassi couple is childless and collects a hairy frog during heavy rains and then eats it, the wife will get pregnant if they have sex the same day. For anyone else who happens to collect a hairy frog accidentally, then it is a sign that their wife will be pregnant soon. Their harvest will be plentiful, or some other positive outcome depending on who you ask. For a majority of Bakassi folks, this is just superstition, but I'm sure this mythology happened to come true for a few of them, otherwise it wouldn't have been circulated. So for all the Bakassi babies who were born because their parents stumbled across a hairy frog the same day they had sex, I hope you are well. Unfortunately, however, the Bakassi tend to hunt more hairy frogs than are being born, so it may be a good idea to cut back on hunting them in excess if possible, but because they are a staple in the people's diets, it may not be a choice. So, either way, I hope they are well. As for those who are in ownership of this species in captivity, I urge you to maybe take on a rather interesting breeding project for the future of this species. After all, there is no footage of them available online, and there absolutely is nothing documenting their fertilization process. If anyone does decide to document their breeding of hairy frogs, do let me know. Any footage of them at all would be wonderful. That's all for the information I could get my hands on regarding the hairy frog. Thank you for making it thus far. If you appreciate this species or other strange little guys the same way we do, consider subscribing or comment and let us know any species you would like us to cover in the future. See you next time. Goodbye.